Total number of buyers is equal to total number of sellers. That is the condition where you are going to say perfectly competitive market. So they mean the value of the next highest valued alternative. Marginal revenue is all about trying to understand the extra income that you are going to get by selling one additional unit of the product. Good morning and welcome to the chapter 4 in microeconomics, where we are going to talk about the theory of firm under perfect market. So this revision class is very important as we are going to concentrate about the perfect market conditions. So let's just go to the chapter summary to understand what is kept in store for us. Starting up with the chapter summary, we're going to talk about an exciting word today called as the perfectly competitive market. Now, all of us know that moment we talk about competition, there cannot be anything perfect. But then in economics, we believe that there is a market condition where there is a perfection that exists, which means to say there are buyers and sellers in equal numbers. So I would say here, total number of buyers is equal to total number of sellers. That is the condition where you are going to say perfectly competitive market. So you have a situation where there's an equal number of buyers, equal number of sellers, followed by the total revenue. Look at the word itself, total revenue. Total revenue is derived by P into Q, which means to say price into quantity. So whenever people are going to ask you this question, how do we arrive into total revenue? The answer is the price of the product into number of products that are being sold, the quantity factor. For any organization today, price and quantity are the deciding factors of their existence in the market. Now, for example, let's take Tata Motors. For Tata Motors, the revenue is counted by the number of cars sold into the price. Now, when you're talking about Nexon, for example, the price of Nexon when it comes to a petrol or a diesel version versus that of an electric version is entirely different. So now what happens is that when you have multiple products at different pricing levels altogether, your total revenue will also change. But at the end of the day, what are you going to count for? You would be counting the price into quantity factor. This is very, very important for all of us to know. So the number of products into that respective price will give you the total revenue, followed by the average revenue. As I've already told you in economics, the word average is a sum total that we are going to speak about. In the moment we start speaking about the sum total factor, this is very, very important for all of us to know. Why? Because here the answer is total revenue divided by quantity. So when we are talking about total revenue, we had told price into quantity. When we are speaking about average revenue, the same total revenue divided by the number of products that is being sold. Let us talk about average revenue here. Average revenue means to say here the sum total factor. So the total revenue divided by the quantity. On an average basis, whenever you look into the corporates who present their balance sheet in the market today, the question that starts emerging is that on an average, how much does the company make? So the answer to that question can be given by the factor, the total revenue divided by the quantity here. That's very, very important for all of us to know. So there is a whole lot of revenue factor here divided by the quantity. Now that makes a huge sense for all of us because that's what we are looking into. Followed by marginal revenue. What is this marginal revenue all about? Marginal revenue is all about trying to understand the extra income that you are going to get by selling one additional unit of the product. So is it true that would you be able to make a marginal revenue every time? The answer is obviously yes. Why? Because to gain marginal revenue, what you have to do is input an additional value to get one additional value as your output. So one additional value here will definitely generate an extra income for you, and that's marginal revenue for you. In a production economy, you need to understand that every company will try to make some or the other in terms of the margin. The higher the margin, that means the company is able to generate better income for itself. So definitely marginal revenue will come from the additional revenue generated. And that's very, very important here. Followed by the supply curve. Now, all of us know the supply curve diagram here. Whenever we talk about the supply curve, it's a line that's going from the left to that of the rightward. It's an upward moving curve altogether. So let me just write the supply curve here. The demand curve is opposite of supply. So you would see here that supply is a curve. It's a line which is rising from the bottom, from the left-hand side, and going up all the way northwards towards to the north side, where we are going to see the supply curve here. The supply curve is very, very important because it determines the flow of the product in the market. Now, every product that is being sold in the market will not have the same supply chain. The reason is quite obvious, because you need to understand what is the demand factor, what is the price factor, and how much the people are looking into that particular product. So the supply curve will keep changing its positions based on the different factors altogether. Now, followed by the determinants of the supply. Now, before we start understanding determinants of supply, let's just have a look into the supply. Why? Because moment a company says today that I'm going to supply something into the market, it might be a mobile phone, it might be an electronic gadget, it might be a camera, it might be a watch, any product on this earth. What are we typically looking into is that trying to create a market for ourselves, trying to create a push into the market where we are going to tell people that this is exactly what we determine to do. So now the determinants of supply are many. For example, technological shift factor, or it might be about the supply of the product itself. The raw materials might be cheaper. So primarily we look for two factors here. One of the factor is the technological factor, because the more you invent on the supply chain factor, the technological push that you give to that product, there would be definitely a rise in the supply. The next one that we need to worry about here is the price of the raw materials or the input that we are going to talk about. So now when I talk about the price of the input factors, moment the price starts falling down, people will buy the inventory in larger quantities, they will start manufacturing it more, and they will try to push it into the market. So technologically, and speaking in regards to that of the inventory, we are going to see a major factor, a major determinant in terms of the supply chain altogether. Now, we see that the supply is a direct relative of the tech and that of the price factor, followed by price elasticity. The word itself is quite interesting for all of us to learn, and it's very simple because the meaning is imbibed there. Elasticity, which means we're talking about a stretchable factor here. Price elasticity means that change in price to that of the supply or to that product all over the particular time. So there is going to be a change in price, there's going to be a change in the system because of the supply chain factor coming into picture. Followed by, let's get into the exam corner, which is very, very important for all of us, starting with the 1-mark question. What is normal profit? Now, is there something called as normal profit, sir? The answer is yes. Why? Because we have to first understand the concept of normal profit, which means it includes the input cost and output cost. So for example, if I'm investing 100 rupees in a particular business and I am able to get the same amount of money as my output, I'm able to, take care of all the expenses, and still I'm able to run the show, I'm on a normal profit factor altogether. So when I talk about the normal profit, I'm trying to say about this input and output. So input and output will make you get that particular factor. Next one, define the marginal revenue. Additional increase in revenue by one additional input. Now that's a very, very important factor, as I was talking about. Additional increase in revenue, which everybody likes. There is some increase in the revenue factor. How does this increase? Because you are giving an additional input altogether. So once you give an additional input, there would be a rise in the outcome altogether, in the value altogether. So that's why we talk about additional increase in revenue by an additional input factor. So you have given an extra factor here through which there is an increase in the input growth, in the revenue factor altogether. Now, marginal revenue is possible only in those industries where you can manufacture en masse, which means the production level can go up certainly on a higher scale, just because you have the capacity, you have the, the scalar chain, the economical chain factor altogether, where you can start going up, and then you would be able to see the marginal revenue. But this is not true for every industries, because the economies of scale for every industry will differ, and so marginal revenue will also keep differing from sector to sector. So that's why marginal revenue is a very, very important thing that companies look for. The next one, write the formula to calculate average revenue. We have given it very, very simple. Total revenue divided by quantity. We had spoken about the same thing in our chapter summary. We're again coming back here. We're going to talk about total revenue divided by quantity. Simple formula. Please remember this. This will help you to score marks in the examination. Followed by the 2 marks question. We're going to talk about something very interesting called as the opportunity cost. Now, what is an opportunity cost? Which means to say that the next best opportunity, the next best cost, the next best alternative that is available to us. And this is very important for all of us to learn. Now, many of us know that in our life, we always get opportunity, and the same thing applies to a business scenario. You will get opportunities to expand. You will get opportunities to produce. You will get opportunities to build your business. But not all the opportunities are going to give you the same return. So what are you going to do? You will wait and seek opportunities that are really brilliant enough in terms of giving you the best revenue in return. So that is where you would start calculating, can I leave some option and take the next best one which is suitable for me, which will be able to generate better revenue for me, and that's where I'm looking at the opportunity cost. So as an entrepreneur, you will seek opportunities which are the best available for you. So that's what the economists also say here, that they mean the value of the next highest valued alternative. So not this one, not the first opportunity, not the second, not the third, the fourth, but then you might find the fifth one is the best opportunity. So you leave the first 4 and then you take the fifth one. No problem at all, because there you find that by taking that opportunity, yes, I'm going to make a best return as far as possible. So that's what we call here as opportunity cost. Followed by, give the meaning of shutdown point. Now, nobody wants to reach to a shutdown point in a business, because that's the end of the business, I would like to say. But then, from the economic standpoint, a shutdown point is a level at which the operations of a company experience no benefit at all. So they're coming down. Let me just put it in a very simple way. Moment you see that the price comes down below the ABC, if the price of the product starts coming down below the average variable cost, that means you are not going to seek anything in return. There is no point in running this business, and you are not going to make 1 rupee also as profit. Now, a shutdown point typically is something. Why? Because you find that this operation is not even generating amount for you for your survival. Now, you're not going to talk about profit, but you're just going to talk about the survival today, and you are not able to survive in a competitive market where you're not able to generate the benefit that you want. Automatically, the organization comes to a complete halt. It comes to a grinding halt where you find that, okay, I'm not able to run this business, so let me quit at this particular juncture. So that's where shutdown point comes into picture. So shutdown point is a level at which the price comes below the average variable cost. The company feels that the operations have to be shut down. We will not be able to run the company in future. Followed by mention the two determinants of the supply curve altogether. And as I've told you, the input cost and the technology factor, we have discussed about it in the chapter summary, but nevertheless, let's try to again revisit the concept here. When I say input costs, the material factors. Now that's very, very important here. Materials that are very, very important. Why? Because when you're talking about the materials cost, when you're talking about how materials cost actually matter to you, that's very important. Why? Because materials are one where you would see that the input cost, if it's lesser, then you will be able to buy more and produce more. So that's why we always call it as a material cost factor. The next one is the technological factor. Now, what's a technology factor all about? All of us know about e-commerce, we know about IT, we know about the new apps that are being floated. Now, these things will actually help you to run the business even more effectively, even more faster, and even more better. So automatically your supply chain will be able to take a rightward shift, which means it's an increase in the supply factor. So these are the two determinant factor for a supply chain curve altogether. Now, followed by, give the price elasticity, so the percentage of quantity and the quality supplied in terms of change in price. So I'm going to talk about quantity and price factor here. So moment I talk about the quantity factor here, that's very, very important for us. Why? Because change in the quantity supply divided by the change in the price. This is the most important thing. Delta Q by delta P. This is what we are typically looking into. Please have a look into the formula. Change in terms of the quantity divided by change in terms of the price is what the price elasticity supply all about. Followed by, let's go to the 4-mark question, explain the determinants of firm in supply chain. As I have told you, technology, taxes, subsidies, price of other goods. There are so many precautionary notes and factors that are being rolling into the market. Of late, when we were talking about the budget, even the budget matters a lot in terms of the supply chain. Why? Because when you look here, it's not just about the technology and the basic resources. We are also talking about taxes, subsidies, and the substitute goods also, prices of other goods that we are talking about. So if there is going to be a change, if there's going to be a momentary activity, a shift happening there, automatically the supply chain will also get disturbed altogether. Now, the supply determinants are also on the other prices can cause a shift in the supply curve. Very important. Why? Because this will matter to us to a very, very great extent. Now, supply determinants other than the price can use shifts in supply curve, which is very much true. Yes, it is going to happen. So automatically you will be able to see the shift that is going to happen in you. That curve is always going to come back in terms of volume to us, followed by how the supply chain actually matters in terms of the growth factor. Now, this is something called as the supply chain curve, where I'm going to show you the total revenue, marginal revenue, and the average revenue. You can see that how these three factors are coming into picture. And with this, I'm going to come to the end of today's revision. I hope and believe that all the concepts which have been spoken here will be of a great resource and benefit to you. In the upcoming class, we are going to talk about Chapter 5 in microeconomics. The revision is going to continue. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.